Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Marty Rosendale. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Technology Council and a partner with Newport. This is the CapitalM ZoomCast that we're sending out live as well as recording it. The CapitalM podcast was originally intended to further the regional conversation around capital markets, define issues, identify solutions, and build consensus to drive change in the region. We have recently pivoted to a live Zoomcast, and our focus these days is more on COVID-19 and the public health emergency that we're all dealing with. The Maryland Technology Council is the industry trade association representing both technology and life science companies throughout the state. And before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping messages for you. First of all, I hope everybody saw that Governor Hogan is going to be doing a press release this afternoon at 5 o'clock. The expectation is that he's going to start making announcements around phase one of reopening our state. So I think it's an important press release for people to pay attention to. And if you live in Maryland and you haven't already looked at the Maryland Strong Roadmap for Recovery, I suggest you take a look because it will give you the outline that the state is expecting to follow as we reopen. And you can find that roadmap to recovery by going to the Maryland Tech Council website at mdtechcouncil.com. You'll see on the front page a link to Governor Hogan's information on COVID-19, and in there you'll find the Maryland Strong Roadmap to Recovery. So just a couple of reminders. Your microphones right now are on mute, and when we get to the Q&A session of our presentation today, we will ask you to raise your hand. As you raise your hand with a question, then we will unmute your mic and allow you to answer that question. We will also be recording this, so anything that you say in the chat room or anything that you say in the Q&A will be a part of that recording. Also, we're going to use the chat function for questions and comments during the discussion. So feel free to open up the chat room, and we will be able to answer questions as we proceed. So with that, I just want to say my guests today are Brian and Millie Panicccia. They are the founders and principals of TechVerus, and they're joined today by one of their clients, Kodi Terry. And Kodi is the Senior Director of Global Technical PMO at Imagine Communications. So thank you all for joining me today. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your support of the Tech Council.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. So just one other quick announcement. So Millie is going to be in the background monitoring the chat room. I would highly encourage any of you, if you have comments, if you have questions, please put them into the chat room. Millie will be able to address those questions and comments as we go along. It also helps me because I will keep the chat room open on my screen, and seeing your comments as we go will help me guide the conversation. So let's jump right into it. Brian, if you would, just take a minute, tell us about yourself, tell us about why you do what you do, because I think it's pretty fascinating.
Great, well, thank you, Marty. So first, Millie and I spent we've spent over 20 plus years in technology, running large, even global engineering and product teams. Well before starting TechVerus almost 10 years ago. And TechVerus today, we use Lean Agile based frameworks such as Scaled Agile framework. And we also use our TechVerus Agile Analytics platform. And what we do is we help clients transform and optimize by reducing waste and maximizing value flow. And to the reason why we love doing what we do, or what sort of gives us that fire in the belly and gets us excited, is everybody on this Zoomcast can probably relate to that common experience we all probably share. So imagine when you were with the highest performing team that you ever worked with, that you were ever a part of, and the things that you were able to accomplish. And how did that personally feel? What did it feel like when you could feed off of that energy and people kind of knew how to cover for each other and enhance the work that you were doing, that shared sense of purpose and accomplishment? And that's really why we do what we do. We help our clients pivot into becoming higher performing organizations through business agility. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, and Kodi will give some examples of how her organization is doing that. But it's more than just seeing our clients reduce waste and gain higher profits, right? When we go back and visit our clients, and the payoff for us is really when we see the difference that it's making in their personal lives. We spend so much time at work, and that has an impact on our families, our security, our personal health, and that's just really valuable to us and important to us.
Yeah, that's great. I love mission-driven businesses, and I can tell you, in looking back on my career, there are a couple of times where we had really top-performing leadership teams, and we still get together. We still talk. We still talk about what it was like to be a part of that team. And it's really a pretty amazing experience. So Brian, we're all dealing with this public health emergency right now. I know the governor isn't calling it a shelter-in-place or shelter-at-home order, but in fact, we are pretty much in quarantine if we're not an essential business. How is that impacting TecVeris? How have you and your office responded to all of this?
Sure, that's a great and really important question. And Marty, honestly, we've been really blessed. We've been very busy. In fact, even I think more busy. And there's a lot of parents out there, and we're parents. We're also having to play double duty and get our children through their education at home and become teachers and get back on calls with clients. But we're really blessed because our advisors, they're based all around the U.S. We have advisors everywhere from Breckenridge, Colorado, to Chicago, to Sarasota, Florida. We have a UX team in Europe and an engineer in Europe. And before COVID, when we weren't traveling to our client sites, we were always working remotely. A long time ago, we rented some office space and we never went there just because the dynamic of what it's like in our tech sector. But switching to what we're doing and how it's impacting our clients, and clients like Imagine they're on the leading edge of technology, whether it's from digital broadcast media to the fintech, to the ad tech, to the ed tech companies that we serve. They're also very, very used to, because of how they have to incorporate the new norm of working with distributed talent pools that are all over the world. While they do still work in the brick and mortars, they're also very well adapted for working remotely. And what's been really encouraging, and some of our clients have really quickly said, we have to adapt and pivot to ensure our workers are safe, and ensure that we can keep business continuity. But most importantly, we've seen some of our customers pivot very quickly and figure out ways to help those people that are, sheltering in place or in their homes, and some of their customers who are worried about, their finances and how they're going to get food on the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So Kodi, I don't know you as well as I know TecVeris and Brian and Millie, but I have got a chance to speak with you a little bit, and it sounds like Imagine Communications is a fascinating company. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, why you do what you do, and some about Imagine as well?
Yeah, so I might be a little biased, but I think that we are pretty fascinating, quite frankly. So we're actually in the global television broadcast hardware and software business. Imagine really specializes in the optimizations and the management of advertising and program assets. We would call that maybe from play out to pay out, if you will. And that goes for cable and satellite providers alike. We have quite a range of product offerings in the television broadcast space, but just to kind of give you an idea, about $1 out of every 4 advertising dollars globally runs through an Imagine solution. So I can tell you that as a company, we take that very seriously, and it's something that we're very proud of. So personally, I am a senior director, as you mentioned, over at Imagine, and I currently oversee our technical PMO. In addition to that, I'm a wife and a mom, so dealing with all of the fun stuff that COVID has thrown at us personally, the same as the rest of you. Maybe uniquely, I was traveling for work once or twice a quarter. However, typically, I actually work remotely and have for about 11 years now. So I've been in the broadcast industry about 20 years. I was a radio DJ for a time. I did support and installation engineering, enterprise IT management, project and engineering management. But most recently, along with my PMO responsibilities, I've added a few more to the alphabet after my signature, which is RTE. That stands for the Release Train Engineer, and that is part of our Agile transformation with Scaled Agile, or SAFE, as you'll hear us talk about probably a little bit later. Basically, that is where TecVerus comes in. They really led us through our transformation, that we consider them partners in our transformation. And that makes me responsible for coordinating our scaled team of teams and aligning our development processes, our commitments, and our communications across Imagine.
Cool. So, Brian, I think it was about a year ago, the Tech Council invited you and Millie to come out and present. And I don't know if you knew it at the time, but the sole purpose behind that meeting was so you could teach me what Agile was. And I don't know that our audience today understands fully what Agile is. Certainly you mentioned it, Kodi mentioned it, you mentioned it when you're talking about TecVerus and what TecVerus is. Just take a minute and explain to us what Agile is.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a deep question. And so to really try to distill it and boil it down, Marty, it really is a mindset first. And then it's a framework. And in that framework, there's definitions of roles and responsibilities. And we have a lot of toolkits to help companies accelerate into this and fully grasp it. But I'll try to give you the elevator pitch on what it is. And so one of the key tenets of Agile is it has to start first with building that team, building an Agile team. And that's taking the talent and skills that normally sit in different departments or silos in an organization. And you're forming a team that has all the talent and skills, the core talent and skills needed to do the work. And we like to say in the Agile coaching world, bring the work to the team, not the team to the work. And what that means is we are forming a team that might, in a normal project organization, a traditionally managed organization, the combination of people that come together to form a project team kind of disband at the end of a project, and then another project comes along. So I've seen this in my career running traditional projects for many years. Those same combinations of people may never work together. And because their reporting lines go into, the reporting lines within their particular functional group, the interests of those different functional groups or the different P&Ls that they manage don't always align. So that's the first piece, that's getting that cross-functional team approach. And then the second major change is, the traditional way of planning complex initiatives. We come together, we get all the requirements, we fix a design, and then we have sign off on it, right? We sign in blood. And then, from a finance and a legal and a regulatory standpoint, we presume that we're going to lock that down, and we're going to end up somewhere out in the future with a fixed solution 3 months, 6 months, a year ahead of time, and it all goes perfectly. And Agile changes that. Agile kind of pivots that and turns that upside down. And what I'd like to say right now, in the face of COVID and what we're seeing, companies are being forced to become Agile, is Agile embraces that knowledge work, whether it's an immunotherapy, building an aircraft, building an avionics system, or writing software, is knowledge work. It's inherently complex. It's unpredictable. And so with Agile, instead of doing that big, large unit of work, we break the work into smaller units, and we define what the outcomes and results that we can measure are to be. We don't try to prescribe, you're going to build something and it's going to have a blue button over here and this. We leave that to smart engineering teams to figure it out. But then what we do is we then organize that work into 2-week iterations, and the team is required to commit to the solution that they can come up with, commit to it, and they have to demo back to stakeholders, which could be end customers, at the end of every 2-week iteration. And they don't get to push out the date. They don't get to change the scope significantly. When they make that commitment, they have to demonstrate it. And that's the time box. And that's a forcing function. Think of the adage, form, norm, storm, and perform. When you bring a team together that's cross-functional, they can apply very divergent perspectives and come up with different ideas to help each other meet that collective commitment. And that iterative cycle, that iterative process, Marty, it's grounded in the scientific method. There's a lot of studies, and we don't have time to go into it in this forum, but there's a lot of brain science around engagement. Having people be responsible for the outcome that they're producing creates a lot more engagement. And that's the real art, I would say, in what Agile is. That's the short answer.
Mm-hmm. The short answer.
The short
Okay.
answer.
So Brian, we're in the middle of a public health emergency. I think we've all lost track of time, but I believe we've been sheltering at home now for about 9 weeks, and so I'm thinking, with everything that everybody is dealing with right now in this situation, why is this the time? Why should a company who hasn't been using agile processes, why would this be the time to adapt it now?
Well, I'll give a couple of quick reasons. When you see the tech giants, Marty, out there in the world that are getting to $1 trillion market caps, or you see the startup of young entrepreneurial software engineers, they're taking some problem that exists in society, and they're disrupting or creating an entire new industry. So with the pace of acceleration of digital transformation and complexity, that is a source of market disruption, and COVID has come along. So we like to say, the science and economics that you see, especially with engaging young people and engineering people that are trying to solve problems, Agile is the way that those giant tech giants have disrupted their industries. And they're also, Amazon, bought Whole Foods. Amazon is now looking at getting into the retail pharmacy distribution business model. So these companies that are able to really be innovative and iterate fastly and adapt fastly are just better equipped to handle that. And I'd like to use your own intro into how you shifted the podcast. You yourself used the term that you pivoted from the normal podcast or the cast in person to doing this over a ZoomCast. And so many companies right now, whether they are intentionally adopting agile practices, when you're in the heat of the battle or you're faced with a crisis, you're very often forced to become agile. Mm-hmm. And think of companies running those big traditional projects. How many of us know the adage of, okay, it's in the month before go live and things aren't going the way they're supposed to, so we're going to have daily meetings. Well, that's like the agile daily stand-up. We're going to start descoping. That's having some of that emergent demo, inspect and adapt. Or we're going to co-locate and go into a war room, right? These are all things that you do on the back end when you realize you're running into challenges. And Agile just builds that in, that pivotability, that constant continuous inspect and adapt up front in the process.
That's really interesting, because we have over 40 companies in this region right now that are working on the response to COVID-19. I think there are 400 shots on target around the world right now, and 10% are happening right here in this region. And that's diagnostics, vaccines, therapeutics. And it's been amazing to watch these companies adapt at the speed that they've pivoted and adapted. They've taken, we're moving at a pace right now in the biotech industry that 9 weeks ago, if you would have asked anybody, they would have said it was absolutely impossible. But we're expecting to have vaccines, therapeutics, all ready to commercialize, ready to go into the market within 12 to 18 months. And we only knew the genetic sequence of this virus as recently as January. And it would be fascinating to compare how these companies have made this pivot and I can see in what they're doing so many of the principles that you're describing, the formation of teams that are focused, and how they're incorporating these principles. And I'm not even sure if they realize they're incorporating, principles that are a part of the agile process. So I find the whole thing fascinating. And then watching what's happening in response to this pandemic, I think these principles are being put into practice without even realizing it. So, if you look at the companies that you've worked with that are already adapting these kinds of agile principles, so they're already prepared for this kind of change and disruption. How has the pandemic affected them differently, or how has their response been different or smoother or improved?
So, I'll take a particular client. I can't mention them by name, but they're a major, national sports network, right? And we work with them and help them in their portfolio and program management and doing these lean scaling models. And when this came out, they were very much a leader in how they responded, and their product teams began to focus intensely on how do we adapt our digital offerings to our consumers who are starved for sports, but create them into these immersive things. So I don't know if, and I'm a sports fan, and, I've been impacted by that, of course, but, while this health crisis is going on, people need some entertainment. And I just watched the running of the Kentucky Derby, and they used data science, and they ran it with Secretariat versus Warhorse versus, the different horses that won the Kentucky Derby in the history of the Kentucky Derby, right? And they broadcast that, and it had a great following. Or you see the way the NFL, and I want to qualify, they're not a client of ours. We'd love that. They created the technology to do much like we're doing here on this Zoom, and they held their draft, the NFL 2020 NFL draft, to the highest ratings and attendance in the history of the NFL draft. And it goes to, the story that Kodi can share about how we took something where people were traveling from all over the world to attend these really powerful, high engaging events where, whether you're the CEO of the company or you're a QA tester working out of India, and you come together, and it's a very democratizing, you all get to challenge each other on the priorities and the challenges and how they made that happen in a very different way. So it excites me. And I know a great mission of the MTC is with a lot of pharma and biotech companies. So we're all rooting for you. And anything that you do, we can do to help the other members that we're grateful to be a part of this community. We'd be really happy to help. And I want to say one last thing. That what we're learning going through this experience is we're not going to unlearn this. We're not going to suddenly go back. What I've seen our public school do with getting our kids into Google Classroom, that's going to augment their capability for delivering education when they go back and hopefully soon into the brick and mortar classroom. So I think those are the things that we want to see coming out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly a lot of this is going to stick, I think. So Kodi, clearly you're a fan, and you've experienced TechVerus, you've experienced the agile principles, and you've experienced the public health emergency. So, kind of give us your insight into all of this, if you would.
So I think I'm going to cover your last question and this one maybe a little bit together here. But now that we're kind of in the middle of this pandemic, we can kind of look back and say, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? We call those retrospectives in the Agile business. But, I really am already looking back, and I have to give props to our leadership team at Imagine. They really had no idea, obviously, at the onset of our Agile transformation that we were going to be hit with a global pandemic just a little over a year later. We had no idea at the time that this framework was going to put us in a place to allow us to, another term we tend to say a lot is pivot without mercy. I would boast honestly that we didn't miss a beat. The offices shut down, the travel was canceled, and in 3 short weeks, we pivoted completely. We took what was typically an in-person only development planning session, and we do that every quarter. We turned it into a fully orchestrated, remote, and global event. And when I say global, we had people from the California Bay Area to Dubai, Australia to the United Kingdom. We had 17 teams and over 200 people, all of them with an attitude of willingness, engagement, and cooperation. And because of it, our customers are going to reap the benefits. They're not going to know that COVID-19 hit us in the middle of what we promised to deliver them. So I think it's really exciting that there is a framework that put us in such a position, not only to be able to pivot toward a new ideal in this crisis, but we're not going to have any trouble going back. And honestly, I think that this is bringing to light for everyone. I think I've heard the term over and over again, the new normal. Maybe we didn't know what was possible before or how we could handle a situation, and we were thrown right in the middle of it. And we can see now, not only can we get through it, we can be successful at it. And maybe there is a new hybrid model or, a new normal that might come out of this.
That's great. I just want to remind everybody and also apologize. I didn't realize when we first started, the chat function wasn't working properly. And it is up and working now. And so please, if you have any questions or comments, open up the chat room and provide them. Also want to let you know that Millie has also been providing some information. She just provided a link to an article that Kodi wrote. And so if you open the chat room, you'll be able to see this information as well. So again, I apologize that it wasn't operating in the first 5 or 10 minutes of our discussion today. So Kodi, you talked about pivoting without mercy, and you had to pivot quickly just like everybody else with this public health emergency. Can you give us a specific example of how Agile principles helped you accomplish that?
I can. So there's a number of different things that Agile teaches you, from putting people before processes and really just consistent improvement. It's kind of part of the teaching and the training that you go through becoming a scaled, agile, safe member, which is exactly what we went through before we started this with TecVerus. And I can say, that without this transformation, this would have been a much bumpier ride. I really consider myself fortunate to have the backing of the leadership at Imagine, but more importantly, my peers and the members that make up the teams that we have at Imagine. We recognize really that being Agile is a culture. Brian mentioned that it's a mindset first. It's a constant work in progress, and we're constantly striving for improvement. One of the things that Agile teaches you is that it's really about progress, not about perfection. So we're taking those little increments, those little things that we can do, and acting on those. And the more little things you can compound, you end up with something big at the end. So we took our entire planning, we broke it down into small pieces, we figured out which pieces we needed to act on, and then we kind of put it all back together. So I would say that that's probably the definition of agility.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you've worked with TecVerus. So what has TecVerus been able to do for you with respect to all these things that you're talking about?
Well, I tend to bother Millie quite a few times a week. We meet up, but I bounce all of my ideas off of her. She gives me feedback on things that she has seen work in other places. We really tackle the logistics of the things that we need to do to make all of our teams successful. Brian comes in, or had come in at the beginning of our transformation. A full assessment of our business was done to really highlight the things that we needed to work on. And I think that there's even a saying out there that Scrum doesn't fix your problems, or agility isn't going to fix your problems, but it will highlight the areas to help you fix. And so when Brian came in, did all of our training, everybody at Imagine that's part of our transformation went through a safe training course and certification with TecVerus, so that we're all on equal playing field. We know the processes, we know the framework. And they've really helped us to adapt it to our specific way of working, and taught us, the Agile principles and the framework that we needed to really mold a better process for our development teams.
Mm-hmm. So Kodi, someone just asked a question in the chat room. They're interested in knowing how the Agile framework might have been customized for your unique company needs.
So you referenced a little bit ago an article that I recently wrote about our PI planning session. And whether you have a big team that does program increment planning, or you just have big Zoom calls, there's something in there for you. And I hope that you get a chuckle out of reading it. Some people might frown upon the fact that we haven't followed every safe rule, if you will. And I think that that's why they call it a framework. So one of the adaptations that we have made, and it won't work for everyone, and we're, as I said, continually improving and really inspecting and adapting all of our processes. I told you earlier, we have 17 teams and over 200 people. That's not probably one of the things that anybody would tout as normal, or that maybe you should follow. However, it does work for us. So it's just one example of kind of how we've changed the framework a little bit.
Okay.
And if I could just add, Marty, there's no one single right way to follow it. And, when I meet with, the SAFE coaches and the fellows and the creators of SAFE at, at the annual summits, there's edge cases and applications. And that's why we're in version 5, right? It gets in a major, revision every 2 years. And a lot of that is from the inspect and adapt that clients come up with. So, Kodi herself has invented new ways of interpreting some of the SAFE stuff through working with their teams, but it's not a rule-based system. And we're always really careful to say it is a framework. It's not a process methodology. You're not certified to follow a process like you were in the days of CMMI or, other frameworks like Six Sigma or something that came before. It's a framework of things that are really grounded in having a growth mindset over a fixed mindset, willing to try new things. And its model itself continues to adopt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we started, I mentioned how the two of you, Millie and Brian, came out and taught me about Agile, and I wasn't kidding. I needed that lesson. I needed that tutorial. But for any one of the three of you or all three of you, I'm curious, how would you respond to somebody who says, "Look, this is just tech jargon. This is tech company stuff. It's tech jargon. I'm running a pizza shop, or I'm running a biotech company. This doesn't apply to me."
Well, I got a great story. So we were trying to pack our car for a vacation, and we had a weekend. And then after we got back from the weekend, our oldest daughter was going to have a violin recital that we were staging at our house. So we had packing and getting the car packed, and at the time our daughters were probably 5 and 7, and it was just pandemonium. And I decided to throw up a Kanban board. And I said to my one daughter, "You love to doodle. Why don't you create the cards?" And she got into putting designs on them and so forth. And we're going to organize into the columns of a backlog, to do, in progress, and done. And we'll all take responsibility for the things that we're good at. And we had never in the history of our family got everybody so organized so quickly. And we actually shared that on Facebook, and I think it got more reposts than any business article we ever put out there. It's just a natural way of working. It really is based and grounded in brain science. And you don't have to be a big team. You don't have to be a software team. And so what we're recognizing, and more companies are adapting today, is marketing firms, medical offices, AstraZeneca is a big They've done a lot of safe implementations in their organizations. Aircraft have been built, buildings are being built, and it's not just for large, right? Small teams iterating in a backlog using a shared tool because they're all collaborating from home all helps you leverage Agile. It's a very natural human way of working.
Mm-hmm. So, Kodi, I think you mentioned the reference to the new normal and what things are going to look like after this pandemic. And frankly, this won't be the last emergency that we face in the economy or in business in general. There will be more. And as we reimagine what this future looks like and think about preparation for other events like this, where does this all fit in that reimagining the future and that preparation?
Well, specifically to some of the things that we were talking about here, I think that everybody has realized that things that we once thought needed to be done in an office maybe don't anymore. Maybe there's a hybrid model to be found. I think some of us have been forced to utilize tools that we've never used before. From a software perspective, think about how big Zoom was before and how big Zoom is now. I feel like we were kind of forced into utilizing some things that actually really raised our collaboration. There is something to be said for face-to-face interaction, that building of relationships, that energy that you get when you have 150, 200 people in the room, or that stadium is full. However, there's also something to be said for watching a hybrid Kentucky Derby from your backyard, or having a Zoom call for just about anything, quite frankly. Is this a way that companies can look to save money? I think that there's a lot of interesting ideas that are coming out. We specifically started using some tooling that allowed us to be globally collaborative at once, all in real time. So, and I know that whether we are face-to-face or still over Zoom, we're going to continue to use those tools. They've become invaluable to us.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. It is interesting, though, when I look at and talk to my colleagues and others, many of them from the tech side of our organization, have been longtime advocates of teleworking and working from home, and they've been very passionate about where that was all headed. And I can tell you that they're sitting home just like all of us, dying to get back to the office right now. And so I think some of this is going to stick. Absolutely, and there's also desire. I mean, people just need human interaction. So I think there's going to be a hybrid as we go forward. And Brian, I have a question for you about the future, but before I ask that question, I need to know who won that Kentucky Derby.
Secretariat.
Secretariat,
But this time not by 31 lengths or 20 lengths. It was a very close 2.5 lengths.
Uh-huh. My wife is an equestrian and a big fan of the Kentucky Derby. She's going to be interested in hearing that. So I'm curious, Brian, when you get out your crystal ball, what does the future look like, and how does this apply?
So that's a great question, and I think I follow a lot of thought leaders and some of the folks in the private equity and capital and where they're putting their investments. And I really, in my mind, I think us getting through COVID is a stress test for those companies. And we've had some of our advisors tell us, if you can continue to build your product and mature and adapt and get through this, then you're going in the eyes of the investors to see how you've been able to weather this storm. You're going to be better prepared to weather storms in the future. So we see it internally and from a TechVerus standpoint as doubling down. But the crystal ball piece is, the agile principles, the principles of data-driven, doing things that have monitoring set up to see if they're successful, where you take small tests of your strategy and you put them into the hands of the market, and you get fast feedback through online tools and things like that. You're seeing a very big transition from direct to consumer, manufacturers to consumers. and they can do A/B testing, and they can pivot their products because they don't have an entire distribution chain. You're seeing companies like Tesla where they can add features to their car over the air. You're just going to see a changing world with the transformation that's happening in our digital economy applied to all kinds of businesses. And I think this getting through COVID is going to battle harden those companies to double down on those ways that they do those processes more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So we're coming up, we're getting close to the end here. So Brian, Millie, Kodi, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to cover before we're done today?
Well, one thing I do want to mention is that we have some training courses coming up that are typically in person, that are, before COVID, were never done remotely, but these are live instructor-led courses. I'll post out the information on those courses. So if you have interest in learning more about Agile or Scaled Agile, we're offering these courses, and we'll continue to offer these public courses in the future. Of course, if we can answer any questions, you can always reach out to us directly if you want to just talk to us about what's going on within your organization and not really attend a public course. So you have a couple of different options of reaching out to us if you want to further this conversation.
So Marty, I think we had another question just come in.
Uh-huh. Yep. Go ahead, Kodi.
Sarah's asking, how do you see the new normal impacting diversity in biotech, especially in recruitment of women who traditionally have to bear an unequal amount of the family responsibilities? How does Agile apply to this question of diversity in improving teams and solving problems? And it's something that I would like to tell you about, I guess, is something that we do at almost every PI planning session that we have. I am a big proponent. Brian used the term growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And I think as we're all working from home, this has been a real challenge for the extroverts. And maybe it's been a welcome for the introverts, I'm not sure. But I think that what has really come to light is that it's very, very important to take care of yourself, to take care of your mental health, to make sure that you walk away from that screen. Don't sit yourself in your office for 12 hours a day. There's other parts of your house that you can go to, right? Close the computer. Agility puts people before processes, and I try really hard to remember that every time we walk into PI planning. I take that as an opportunity to really foster a culture and a mindset that makes people think about how they deal with challenges well before COVID, how you deal with adversity, how you deal with things being thrown in your path. Is there a better way? Can you react better? How can we be better communicators, better team members? There's a number of different topics, and I usually try to pick a theme for every PI. We recently did a couple of them called the PI of why, and we really wanted people to dig into what is your why? Why are you here? Why are we doing what we do? What is our end goal, right? What do our customers need? That's why we're doing this. So agility, you might say that it's tech speak, but I think that it really goes a lot deeper than that. And I hope that that helps a little bit with your question there, Sarah.
And Sarah, I know your question is a lot about diversity, and I don't know if this is an agile principle or not, but I would just say that a lack of diversity results in a lack of insight and a lack of vision. I think in a situation where we're all trying to reimagine what this future will look like, and we're redefining our businesses and our companies, diversity is critical. Otherwise, you miss important aspects of this future. And I hope everybody realizes that, and we should always be focused on diversity. So,
Marty,
go ahead, Millie.
Sorry, I thought maybe I would just follow up with one other thing related to the question of recruitment of women, and this speaks more to a COVID or post-COVID environment and the work from home piece rather than specifically to Agile. But something that we've always been big believers in at TecVerus, and which is why we have such a distributed workforce with flexible schedules, is we have people that have children. We have people who have aging parents on our team. We have children ourselves, and not everyone wants to, or it's healthy to conform with the sort of air quotes work hours where you're in an office 5 days a week for X number of hours per day. It just doesn't work for all of us. And so one thing that I hope from my perspective that comes out of this post-COVID environment is an increased acceptance of alternate schedules that help balance some of those things that we all have in our lives, and we are included in that. And so we've just seen families be able to balance a lot of responsibilities, and there are moments of incredible stress. But I will also mention that we recently sent out a survey to another customer about asking whether or not their teams were feeling less productive, more productive, or just as equally as productive as pre-COVID. And we expected them to say, we are less productive because we're homeschooling and doing all these other things, and we have connection issues. And they overwhelmingly felt like they were more productive. And we were incredibly surprised by that data. Now, this isn't a million people taking this survey. This is one customer, right? So, but it was an interesting insight into one particular environment, and we were very surprised by those outcomes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I hope we can adapt in that way. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing a lot of is, there are people that are struggling because now they have their kids at home and they're homeschooling and they have all these interruptions, and they're trying to adapt their work hours. But unfortunately, what ends up happening to them is they end up working from early in the morning till the afternoon, and then they end up working into the night as well. And it's just something that I think many of us are struggling to adapt to. I also talk to a lot of people that tell me, I get up in the morning, I sit down at my desk, I plug in, and then I'm there for 10 hours, which I also don't think is healthy. So I think we still have some more adapting to do before we get this down.
Yeah, the good news is we have some room for improvement, but I think that it'll open up a whole new series of training opportunities for people to learn, how to do better at those things that they may not have even known they needed to be better at.
Absolutely.
If I could just add something, Marty, I think there's one key teaching in what we teach, and even in the courses, especially for leaders, is, if you put people to redline continuously, with the intuitiveness that says you're going to get more, you end up getting less. And so right. Over and over again, the science shows that burning people out is not the way to do it. And the science also shows the level of engagement that you get when you recognize the authenticity and have empathy and lead with empathy rewards itself and brings it to the team. So there's entire sections of our leadership course just around leading with empathy. And that's a big piece of it. So to the person who sent in that question, you can actually prove the economics of these things. And there's been studies on diversity, diverse teams with divergent lateral thinking, trounce teams that are fixed into one particular group or demographic or skill set.
Absolutely. So I would just like to say, if you've been listening and you like what you've heard, I highly recommend that you contact TecVerus and talk to them about what they can do for you. I think what they're doing for companies is amazing, and their ability to help companies navigate this current challenge and prepare for future challenges is also phenomenal. So Brian, Millie, Kodi, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your commitment.
Thank you very much, Marty.
Great. Thanks,
you. Marty. We're glad to be here. Thank you.
And for those of you that are listening and are not already members of the Maryland Tech Council, I would encourage you to take a look at our website at mdtechcouncil.com. As I said earlier, we are the industry trade association representing technology and life science companies throughout the state, and we would love to have you join our membership. So thank you, everybody. And again, Brian, Millie, and Kodi, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.